Autumn sunlight streamed through the large windows of the Brookside Academy cafeteria, casting golden streaks across the tables. Outside, crimson maple leaves drifted gently in the breeze. But inside, the air was loud and chaotic. The clatter of stainless steel trays, the shuffle of shoes on the floor, the laughter and chatter of children blended into a noisy, bustling symphony of pure spontaneity. In the far corner at a table by the wall, a little girl sat curled up, her feet tucked under the chair, as if trying to hide herself from every gaze. This was Emily Carter, 5 years old. Her slightly messy brown hair was hastily tied into a low ponytail. She wore a faded gray wool dress, its hem fraying white socks now tinged with yellow, and a pair of worn-out sneakers. In front of Emily sat a small plastic lunchbox with a transparent lid. Inside, there was only a single slice of plain white bread and a bottle of water. No butter, no jam, no cold cuts, no fruit, no vegetables. A lunch so bare that even the least picky child might pause in surprise at the sight of it. Emily opened the box slowly, as if trying to stretch out the time before everyone could see. She cast a quick glance around, hoping no one would notice. But that hope dissolved within seconds. "Look at that. What's she eating?" "Just bread and water." A boy's voice rang out from a nearby table loud enough for everyone to hear. A few heads turned. The curious, amused eyes of her classmates were like tiny pins pricking through Emily's fragile defenses. "Maybe her family's so poor they can't afford real food," scoffed Chloe, a blonde girl whose eyes glimmered with a hint of malice. Giggles rippled through the air. Emily lowered her head, gripping the slice of bread so tightly her fingers turned pale. A burning heat spread from her face down her neck. She swallowed hard, forcing back the tears welling up. In that moment, the morning's memory came rushing back. Her mother, Sarah Carter, had risen early despite her persistent coughing fits. In the dim yellow glow of the kitchen light, she had cut the last slice from the loaf of bread, placed it into the lunchbox, and softly said, "Bring half home for Lucas, okay? Your brother's still running a fever." Emily had nodded, hiding the disappointment in her chest. It wasn't the first time she had to split her lunch for her younger brother. Lucas, only 3, had been sick almost all autumn. Her mother worked 2 low-paying jobs, her health fragile, so everything in the household was calculated down to the last cent. The scrape of a chair against the floor snapped Emily back to the present. Another boy, Ethan, strolled past her table, glanced into her lunchbox, and let out a laugh, like a prisoner's meal. "Did you forget what real food tastes like?" The words cut like a cold knife. Emily wished she could vanish, melt into the cold wall behind her, but all she could do was bow her head lower, chewing the dry bread slowly to mask the trembling. Her gaze drifted almost unconsciously toward the cafeteria doors, where light spilled in from the hallway. She wished for a miracle, something to lift her out of this ring of mockery. And then, as if by impossible coincidence, the door opened. A tall man stepped in, dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit, a dark tie, and polished leather shoes. Sunlight from the windows behind him cast his figure into sharp relief amid the noisy scene. He was Michael Reynolds, CEO of Reynolds Innovations, one of the school's major donors for education and lunch programs. This visit was supposed to be just another item on his work agenda, a meeting with the school board, a tour of the facilities. But as his eyes swept across the cafeteria and landed on the far corner, everything changed. He saw Emily. The sight of that small figurehead bowed over a slice of bread and a bottle of water stirred something deep in Michael's memory. He saw himself years ago, a boy in a worn sweater, sitting in a public school cafeteria, gnawing on a hard piece of bread to stave off hunger through the afternoon. The laughter, the mocking, the pitying stares, all the things he thought he had left behind. Michael froze for a moment. He caught the whispers from the table beside Emily, enough to grasp the situation. Her head never lifted, but her small shoulders trembled. And in that instant, he knew he couldn't just walk past like a visiting guest. Without a word to the staff member accompanying him, Michael strode straight to the serving counter. He picked up a tray of food not for himself, but for the little girl. He chose steaming pasta, steamed vegetables, a portion of fresh fruit, and a small carton of milk. The full, colorful tray stood out vividly among the more ordinary lunches. As he returned to the cafeteria, the chatter softened. Many eyes followed him curiously. Michael walked to the corner table and gently set the tray in front of Emily. "This is for you. Eat, and if there's any left, take it home," he said, his voice warm yet soft, as though afraid to startle her. Emily looked up, her pale blue eyes wide with surprise. She glanced at the tray, then back at the man before her. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Michael smiled, not pushing her. He pulled out a chair and sat across from her. At the next table, Ethan and Chloe lowered their gazes to their own food. Emily reached for the spoon, scooped a bit of pasta, then set it down again. In a small, hesitant voice, she murmured, I have to save it for my mom and brother. They're sick." Michael tilted his head slightly, looking deep into those young eyes. In them he saw a resilience many adults never found. And in that moment, a single, certain thought formed in his mind. He wasn't going to leave with just a tray of food. The gentle clink of a spoon against a metal tray echoed in the quiet between them. Emily kept her head down, strands of brown hair falling forward to hide most of her face. She didn't touch the food right away, just looked at it as if weighing something far more important than hunger. Michael observed every small movement, sensing the caution hidden beneath her polite demeanor. Unlike most children who would light up at the sight of a special meal, Emily seemed anxious, perhaps even guilty. "You don't like pasta?" he asked, keeping his tone light as if it were just casual conversation. Emily shook her head, her eyes flicking quickly toward the cafeteria doors before returning to the tray. She pressed her lips together, then spoke softly, "I do. But my mom and little brother haven't had anything nice to eat in days. If I eat it all, then..." She left the sentence unfinished, but Michael understood completely. A forkful of soft pasta, a shiny red apple. Small things to most people, but for her they posed a difficult choice between filling her own stomach and bringing a bit of happiness home. Michael nodded slowly. "Then, eat what you need to be full. The rest we'll take to them." This time Emily looked up at him for a little longer. A faint glimmer of trust flickered in her pale blue eyes, fragile but real. She picked up the spoon, took a small bite of pasta, and ate slowly, as if calculating each mouthful, so that what remained would still look perfect as a gift to bring home. Michael didn't rush the conversation. He knew that for children who had lived with scarcity, trust couldn't be built in minutes. He simply sat there, his gaze steady, reassuring her that she had no reason to feel ashamed or afraid. At the next table, Ethan and Chloe ate in silence, sneaking occasional glances over. The presence of Michael, a powerful, well-known figure in the city, had erased their teasing as if it had never happened. A teacher, Ms. Bennett, Emily's homeroom teacher, approached. "Mr. Reynolds, what a surprise to see you here," she said, her voice a mix of surprise and caution. "Just stopping by?" Michael replied, his eyes still on Emily. "She's one of your students?" Ms. Bennett nodded. In the hint of sadness in her expression, Michael could tell she knew Emily's circumstances well. But like so many others, she was likely limited by school policies and available resources. "Emily's a good student, well-behaved. Just a little quiet sometimes," Ms. Bennett said, then offered the girl a small, encouraging smile. "Go on, eat, sweetheart. This is a special treat." Emily nodded faintly and took a few more bites of vegetables. Michael noticed that each time she chewed, her eyes drifted toward the fruit and milk clearly meant for her mother and brother. Lunch passed slowly. When the bell signaled the end of break, children began clearing their trays and leaving the cafeteria. Emily stood about to carry her tray away, but Michael stopped her. "Wait, let me help you pack this." From the serving counter, he took a few clean containers, gently packed the fruit milk and leftover pasta inside and placed them in a paper bag. "Here, take this home to your mom and brother. But promise me you'll eat enough for yourself before you think about sharing with others." "All right," Emily hesitated, then nodded. That nod wasn't just agreement, it was an acknowledgement that she accepted his care. Michael stood ready to say goodbye, but something made him pause. The image of Emily curled up at that corner table lingered in his mind, intertwined with memories of his own childhood. He remembered the bite of long winters, the sting of being called the poor kid, and the nights he'd gone to bed hungry, so his mother could eat the last bit of rice. As Emily moved toward the cafeteria doors, Michael suddenly asked, "Is your home nearby?" She turned back, eyes wide. Not too far." "Why, if you don't mind, I'd like to walk with you. I want to meet your mom and see how your brother's doing." Emily hesitated. Clearly, she wasn't used to letting a stranger, even one who had just given her a meal, step into her private family world. But perhaps because Michael's gaze held nothing but sincerity, she gave a small nod. "Okay. But our house is kind of old. That's perfectly fine," Michael said with a genuine smile. As they stepped out into the schoolyard, the autumn breeze swirled gently, carrying a few golden maple leaves to the ground. Michael let Emily walk ahead, holding the paper bag with the remaining food. He wondered what he might find at her home, and why his heart felt this strange blend of worry and a deep desire to help. A few steps behind them, Ms. Bennett stood in the doorway, watching quietly. Her eyes held both hope and a trace of apprehension, as if this story might grow into something far larger than a shared lunch. Michael didn't yet know that following Emily home that afternoon would become a turning point in his life and in the life of her small family. But deep down, he already felt it. This wasn't just about making sure a child ate well for one day. It was the beginning of a bond, one whose full shape he couldn't yet see, but one he had already decided never to let go. The gates of Brookside Academy stood quietly under the shade of old maple trees. As Michael and Emily stepped out, the afternoon sunlight had taken on a warm golden hue, stretching across the sidewalk. The autumn breeze whispered past, carrying a few dry leaves that rustled softly underfoot. Emily walked a short distance ahead, her small shoulders rising and falling with each step. In her hands she carried the paper bag holding the leftover food as though it were a treasure to be guarded. Michael followed behind, keeping just enough distance not to crowd her, yet close enough to step in if needed. "Which way is your house?" Michael asked gently. "That way." Then down a small alley, Emily replied, pointing toward a street lined with older buildings. They crossed 2 blocks, and the surroundings began to change. Well-kept houses with white-painted fences gave way to rows of aging apartment blocks, their walls peeling windows patched with sheets of plastic. The sidewalks grew uneven, cracked in places with small puddles collecting in dips. Michael said nothing, but his eyes took in every detail. The scene was achingly familiar, bringing back memories of his own childhood neighborhood. It stirred a mix of sadness and a quiet, unshakable resolve. Emily turned into a narrow alley. The air was thick with the mingled scents of dampness, cooking oil from small food stalls, and uncollected garbage. Children played at the base of an iron stairwell, their laughter mingling with occasional shouts of argument. A few adults sat on stoops, their curious eyes following Michael and Emily as they passed. Emily's apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old red brick building. The iron staircase groaned under each step. Emily climbed quickly, used to the sound, while Michael moved more slowly, partly observing, partly thinking about how to start the conversation with her mother. At the faded wooden door, Emily turned back. "This is our place. But my mom doesn't know you're coming." Michael offered a reassuring smile. "That's all right. I just want to say hello and drop off some food." Emily knocked 3 soft times. A woman's voice, hoarse and faint, called from inside Emily. "You're home." The door creaked open. A young woman stood there, thin, with loose brown hair and a pale complexion. Her brown eyes widened slightly when she saw Michael behind her daughter. "And this is—" she asked, her voice laced with curiosity and a trace of caution. Emily glanced at her mother and spoke quickly. "Mom, this is Mr. Michael. He gave me lunch, and this is for you and Lucas. Sarah Carter." Emily's mother paused. Her eyes moved from the paper bag in Emily's hands to the tall stranger. Something in Michael's manner, polite yet unassuming, seemed to ease her guard a little. "Please, come in," Sarah said at last, though her tone still held a hint of hesitation. Inside the apartment was small but tidy. The walls were yellowed with age, the ceiling stained with watermarks. An old sofa was pushed against the wall, a small coffee table neatly stacked with a few newspapers. The air carried the faint scent of boiled vegetables and a whiff of antibiotics. In the corner, Lucas, a blonde-haired boy with cheeks flushed from fever, was curled under a thin blanket. When he saw his sister, he smiled weakly. Emily hurried over, set the paper bag on the table, and took out the carton of milk. Michael lingered near the door, his eyes noting the small details. The old space heater, the bottle of cough syrup on the table, the compact refrigerator humming in the corner. They painted a picture of a family making do with very little. Sarah sat on the sofa, coughing lightly before speaking. "I appreciate you helping, Emily, but I don't want to trouble you." Michael smiled, his voice sincere. "It's no trouble at all. I was at the school today and happened to see Emily in the cafeteria. I just thought, if I could help in some way, I should." Sarah fell quiet for a moment. She looked at her daughter now, cutting up fruit for her little brother, her eyes showing pride mixed with worry. "We're managing. It's just that Lucas has been sick lately, and I've had to miss a few shifts, so things have been a little tight," she said, keeping her tone steady. Michael nodded, not pressing for more. He knew how pride could make people reluctant to speak of hardship. He had seen the same in his own mother. Lucas finished the milk and looked at Michael with shy curiosity. Emily introduced him. "This is Mr. Michael Lucas. He's really nice." The boy gave a faint smile, then leaned against his sister's shoulder. Something clenched inside Michael's chest. In this moment, it was clearer than ever that this was about far more than a meal. How could he walk away after stepping into this room, after looking into these eyes? He rose slowly. "Thank you for letting me visit. I won't take up more of your time. But if you ever need anything, or if Lucas needs to see a doctor, please don't hesitate to reach out." Sarah seemed about to respond, but his expression made her pause. She simply nodded, a reluctant acceptance that wasn't quite a refusal. When Michael stepped out into the corridor, the sunset had painted the narrow walkway in a warm orange glow. Emily walked him to the stairs. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice less timid than at lunchtime. "You're a strong girl, Emily. But being strong doesn't mean you have to do everything alone." Michael replied, his eyes firm yet kind. She said nothing, just nodded her blue eyes, reflecting something different from before. Not exactly joy, but perhaps hope. Michael left the building, walking slowly down the narrow street. He knew he would return, not out of a businessman's sense of civic duty, but for a reason far more personal, one he couldn't yet name, but already felt deeply. That night the city seemed wrapped in a dark blanket, broken only by the golden glow spilling from windows and the faint hiss of wind threading through empty streets. Michael sat alone in his spacious office on the top floor of the Harrington Group building. Before him sat a cup of coffee gone cold and the dimly lit laptop screen crowded with dozens of unread emails. But Michael's focus wasn't on work. His mind was still caught on the image of that cramped apartment, the soft cough of Sarah, and the look in her eyes, part pride, part worry, when she said, "We're managing." He closed his eyes, drawing in a deep breath, and memories came flooding back. Over 30 years ago, a thin, brown-haired boy had sat in a drafty little room, listening to the wind whistle through the cracks in the door. His mother, small in stature but unyielding in spirit, worked tirelessly from dawn until late at night to care for her 2 children. That boy, Michael, still remembered the mix of pride and an ache he'd felt when he saw her politely refuse financial help from a neighbor clinging to the fragile thread of dignity she could still protect. "We're fine, son, as long as I'm here." Her voice from all those years ago echoed now uncannily similar to the words Sarah had spoken that afternoon. Michael opened his eyes, his fingers tapping unconsciously on the polished wooden desk. He realized that if he walked away now, Emily and Lucas would go on living the same life he once had, scraping by on meager meals, their future boxed in by circumstance. The chime of the old clock in the corner pulled him back to the present. He rose, walked to the liquor cabinet, then stopped. Instead, he poured himself a glass of water, sat down again, and opened a blank note on his computer. He began to type. Immediate goal: ensure the Carter family has enough food and medicine for the next 3 months. Long-term goal: help Sarah find stable employment and provide educational opportunities for Emily and Lucas. Resources: Harrington Foundation Charity Fund network of trusted doctors and teachers. But at that point, Michael paused. He didn't want this to be just another act of giving checked off like a corporate obligation. He wanted this help to mean real change, a door opening for them, not just a temporary gift. The phone on his desk buzzed with a text from James Walker, his trusted assistant boss. Board meeting at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Sent the documents to your email. Michael read it, but didn't reply right away. His mind drifted back to that moment when Emily had walked him to the stairs. The flicker of hope in her eyes had reached into a part of him he thought he'd sealed off years ago. He stood and moved to the window. From here, the entire city sprawled out before him. Glittering skyscrapers, brightly lit streets, and far in the distance, pockets of darkness where the light rarely touched. No one chooses where they're born. But everyone deserves the chance to step out of the shadows, he murmured. The decision crystallized in that instant. Tomorrow, after the board meeting, he would call Dr. Howard, a renowned pediatrician he'd worked with on a community project, to arrange an appointment for Lucas. Then he would meet with Rachel Moore, HR director at a partner company who was always on the lookout for diligent candidates for office roles. Sarah could start fresh there. For Emily, he considered covering her tuition and enrolling her in the school's art club, somewhere she could nurture her creativity instead of living under the constant weight of scarcity. But deep down, Michael knew he would have to do more. He couldn't be just the kind stranger who once helped and then disappear. He would become a quiet but steadfast presence in their lives, just as a neighbor had once been for his mother, asking nothing in return. He returned to his desk and typed one more line at the top of the list. Reason: because I understand them. Because I've been there. He sat still for a long moment, staring at the screen. The heaviness from the afternoon slowly gave way to a calm determination. He knew the Carter family's life wouldn't change overnight. But if he stayed committed step by step, there would come a day when Emily and Lucas wouldn't have to hide their lunch in a corner of the cafeteria. The night had grown late. Michael turned off the desk lamp, leaving only the faint light spilling in from the hallway. As he stepped out of the office, he felt different than when he'd walked in, lighter, clearer. Tomorrow it would begin, not as a corporate plan, but as a personal promise. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the office window blinds, casting a warm golden strip across Michael's wooden desk. He had arrived at work early, just finishing a call with Dr. Howard to schedule an afternoon appointment for Lucas. Everything was moving according to plan. But as Michael was preparing documents to send to Rachel Moore regarding a possible job for Sarah, another call came in from an unfamiliar number. "Hello, is this Mr. Michael Harrington?" an older man's voice asked, deep and deliberate. "Yes, speaking. My name is George Wallace. I'm the Carter family's attorney. Or to be more precise, I was the attorney for Sarah's father." Michael paused. Sarah's father. The words triggered a faint memory, an old charity file his foundation had once received years ago belonging to a man named Carter who had lived in the same town where Michael had grown up. "And why are you contacting me?" Michael asked, keeping his tone steady. George cleared his throat, then spoke slowly. "Mr. Harrington, there's something I believe you should know, especially since you've been helping the Carter family, Sarah. She's not just a single mother in need. She's your blood niece." The room fell so silent Michael could hear his own heartbeat. "What did you say Sarah's father, Edward Carter, was your father's half-cousin?" Edward passed away 3 years ago, before he had the chance to reconnect with his paternal relatives. He left a letter for Sarah asking me to deliver it if the opportunity ever arose. And I believe that opportunity is now. Michael sank into his chair, one hand pressing to his forehead. Family on his father's side had always been a scattered, half-forgotten history, relationships lost to distance and old grudges. He had never once heard his father mention Edward. "Do you still have the letter?" Michael asked, his voice low and rough. "I'll have it delivered to you this afternoon. But please, consider carefully whether now is the right time to tell Sarah. She's endured a great deal of loss." When the call ended, Michael sat motionless. Fragments of memory tumbled back, family gatherings from his childhood. Fleeting faces he hadn't known, and a vague sense of something missing. Now the pieces were shifting into a picture he'd never expected to see. Knowing Sarah was his niece changed everything. What he was doing for her and the children was no longer just compassion, it was family responsibility. Yet Michael also knew that if he revealed the truth now, she might question his motives, or worse, feel betrayed. That afternoon, Michael drove to Sarah's apartment to take Lucas to his appointment. Emily was at her small desk, diligently coloring a picture, a man standing with 2 children under the sunlight. Michael's breath caught when he noticed the man's hair was exactly like his own. Michael. "I'm finished. Do you want to see it?" Emily ran over, holding out the paper with a bright smile. Michael took it and studied it for a long moment. "It's beautiful, Emily. Who's this?" "It's my dream," she said. "Me, Lucas, and someone who always protects us, like you." Michael's chest tightened. He gently patted her head, feeling an invisible thread pulled tighter between them. At the clinic, Dr. Howard confirmed Lucas had a mild case of pneumonia and detected signs of potential asthma. "It's good you brought him in now. I'll prescribe medication and give you instructions for special care over the next few days." Sarah thanked the doctor repeatedly. Michael watched her, still holding herself with strength, yet unable to hide the weight of her worry. He wanted to tell her the truth then and there, but swallowed the words. It wasn't the right moment. That evening, returning home, Michael found a brown envelope waiting at his door sent by George Wallace. Inside was a time-worn handwritten letter. The shaky script of Edward Carter unfolded before his eyes. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone. I was wrong to let you grow up without knowing your father's side of the family. Seek out Michael Harrington. He is my cousin and someone you can trust. Blood ties never fade, no matter how far life pushes us apart. Michael folded the letter, holding it tightly in his hand. The words felt like they were meant not only for Sarah, but for him as well. He sat at his desk, opening his laptop to draft a new plan, not just to help, but to slowly build a real family connection. He knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. This secret could change everything. But Michael had already made up his mind. When the time was right, he would tell Sarah not as a benefactor, but as family. The day ended with his thoughts pulling in different directions. Michael stood by the window, looking out over the city lights blooming against the night sky. Inside him, a new resolve had taken root, not only to support them, but to bring them back to where they truly belonged. Monday morning, the sky hung heavy and gray, as if warning of a troubled day ahead. Sarah led Emily and Lucas to the bus stop with a mix of worry and hope. Lucas was stronger now after rest and medication. But today was his first day back at school after nearly a week's absence. Michael had offered to drive the children himself, but Sarah had gently declined. She feared the curious stares of neighbors, the whisper of gossip about her sudden closeness to a successful man. She had no idea, however, that what would happen at school today would push things much further than she expected. When the bus stopped at the school gates, Emily hopped off first, Lucas following. Immediately, a few watchful eyes from his classmates turned toward him. "Hey, there's Lucas. Last time he only had bread and water for lunch." A boy's voice rang out. A blonde girl standing nearby chimed in. "I heard he missed school because they couldn't afford to see a doctor." Lucas lowered his head, his hand tightening around his backpack strap. He said nothing, only walked faster toward the classroom, willing the bell to ring and silence the whispers. By lunchtime, Lucas carried his tray, a simple meal of a sandwich, an apple and milk, and made his way to the corner table where Emily was already waiting. The peace didn't last long. A freckled, broad-shouldered boy plopped his tray down at the next table and leaned over. "Hey, Lucas, no dry bread today." Laughter erupted from a nearby group. Emily opened her mouth to reply, but Lucas lifted a hand to stop her. He drew in a slow breath, trying to keep his voice even. "Food is food. What matters is that you appreciate it." A few students blinked at the unexpected answer, but one or two snickered. "Listen to him, sounds like a little old man." At that moment, the cafeteria door swung open. Michael stepped in, dressed in a simple gray suit, carrying a large paper bag. The chatter fell away almost instantly. He smiled and walked straight to Lucas and Emily's table. "Sorry to interrupt. I brought a few homemade desserts for you two. I hope it's all right if we share them with your friends." Michael set out boxes of fragrant almond cookies and glossy fruit tarts. The scent drifted across the room, making several students swallow hard. Lucas looked startled. "Why? Why are you here, Uncle Michael? I was passing by and remembered I hadn't given you these yet." Michael replied easily, his eyes calmly scanning the room. A girl asked hesitantly, "Who are you two?" "Lucas." Michael smiled warmly. "I'm a friend of Lucas's family. But more importantly, I think everyone deserves a warm lunch and a happy day at school." He placed the dessert boxes in the center of the cafeteria table and spoke clearly. "Let's all share. No one should be teased for the food they bring. Food doesn't define who you are. Your heart does." The words moved through the room like a fresh breeze. Some students lowered their eyes, others nodded quietly. The mocking laughter from moments ago was gone. Not everyone, however, was pleased. The cafeteria supervisor, Mrs. Parker, approached with a frown. "Are you a parent here?" "No. But Lucas's mother gave me permission to visit Michael," answered politely. Mrs. Parker glanced at Lucas, then at the boxes of cookies. "In the future, please contact the school first. We have rules about outside food. Michael nodded. I understand. I just hoped we could make an exception today for a special reason. She said nothing more, but the coolness in her gaze made Lucas feel a chill run down his back. When the final bell rang, Sarah was waiting at the gate. Emily rushed to tell her about the surprise party in the cafeteria, while Lucas was quieter than usual. On the walk home, Sarah asked softly, "You okay, Lucas?" He nodded, though his expression was thoughtful. Michael, who had come from his office to pick them up, noticed immediately. Sometimes changing how people think doesn't happen in one meeting, he said. But today, at least, they saw you differently. Lucas looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. That evening, Sarah received a call from the principal. Her tone was crisp, formal. Ms. Moore, we received reports that a man who is not a parent brought food into the cafeteria. This violates the school's food safety policy. Sarah hesitated before replying. He's a benefactor of my family. Today was just a kind gesture. Even so, if it happens again, we will have to take action. And I should also mention that rumors about your family's situation are drawing unwanted attention to Lucas and Emily. After hanging up, Sarah sat in silence. When Michael arrived and saw her face, he knew the storm at school was far from over. He placed a hand on her shoulder. If they want to make this difficult, we'll face it head on. No one has the right to make those kids feel small. Sarah looked at him, torn between gratitude and worry. She didn't want her children to be hurt any further, but she also understood if they didn't confront it now, the whispers would never end. The chapter closes as rain begins to fall outside, the steady patter against the windows, sounding like a warning of the challenges to come. But this time, Lucas and Emily are no longer alone, and Sarah will not have to fight by herself. The next morning, pale gold sunlight slipped through the curtains, but it did little to lift the heaviness in Sarah's chest. The principal's call from the night before still clung to her mind like a stubborn stain. Emily and Lucas were ready for school. At the doorway, Michael stood holding a steaming thermos. "Coffee for the most exhausted teacher in the city," he said with a half-joking smile that drew a faint laugh from Sarah. But the smile vanished when she noticed Lucas hesitating nearby. The boy pressed his lips together, his gaze wavering before he let out a sentence as light as a breeze. "Mom, I have something to tell you." Sarah knelt so her eyes were level with his. "What is it, Lucas?" Lucas glanced at Emily, then at Michael as if to make sure he was safe. "Some kids at school said, you're only friends with Mr. Michael, so we can have money for better food." His voice was soft, but each word pricked Sarah's heart like a needle. Emily broke in angrily. "They also said you missed school because Mom couldn't afford to treat you." "That's not true, is it?" "Mom?" Sarah swallowed hard. "No, it's not true. We've always taken care of each other, and Mr. Michael helps us because he wants to, not because of what they think." Michael stepped forward and knelt beside Lucas. "Do you know why people say bad things about others?" Lucas shook his head. "Because they don't understand. And when people don't understand, they imagine the worst." Michael set his hand resting on the boy's shoulder. His voice was warm, but firm. "But there's only one truth, and I think it's time we told it." Sarah looked up at him, her eyes a mix of worry and curiosity. "What do you mean?" "A confession," Michael replied simply. "Not to them first, to these two children. So they'll never have to doubt." Michael took a deep breath. "I'm not just a friend of the family. I was your father's best friend. We grew up together in a small seaside town. Your father Daniel saved my life once when we were teenagers. That's a debt I could never forget." Emily and Lucas's eyes widened. The day your father passed away, Michael continued, I was overseas. I didn't make it back in time. When I heard the news, I promised myself that if I ever had the chance, I would protect Daniel's family as if it were my own. And when I met your mother again, I knew it was time to keep that promise. Sarah blinked, her throat tightening. She had never imagined Michael's connection to her past and to her late husband ran so deep. Lucas looked from Michael to Sarah. So, you're helping us because you love Dad? Michael nodded, and because I believe you both deserve a happy childhood. No one has the right to take that away with rumors. Emily's lips curved into a small smile, but Lucas still frowned. But what if they don't believe us? Then you don't have to convince everyone, Michael said firmly. You just have to live the truth. Time will take care of the rest. Sarah rose and paced the living room. If we don't address this, the rumors will only spread. But if we do, are you sure you're ready? I've been ready since the day I came back to this town. Michael answered without hesitation. She exhaled, but in her chest, a decision began to form. Then this afternoon after school, we'll meet with the principal. And you'll tell her everything. So this ends. Michael smiled. I'll be right there with you. Before boarding the bus, Lucas turned back and wrapped his arms tightly around Michael. Thank you for telling the truth. Michael ruffled his hair gently. You'll see once the light shines and the darkness disappears. Sarah watched from the curb, emotions surging through her gratitude, sorrow, and a fragile spark of hope. She knew that after today, life for her and the children would never be the same. Outside, the sky was clearing after the night's rain, but Sarah could feel it. The real storm was still ahead, and they would have to walk through it together. On Saturday afternoon, the small town seemed livelier than usual. The main street in front of the cultural center was lined with colorful banners reading Children's Art Exhibition, Colors from the Heart. It was a joint event between the school and Michael's charitable foundation, and Emily had been selected as one of the featured young artists. Sarah held Emily's hand as they entered the hall. The white walls were brightened by dozens of cheerful paintings, each telling a child's story. But the most striking, right in the center of the room, was Emily's piece, The House in the Sunlight. A warm yellow cottage with 3 people holding hands at the front door. Emily stood shyly beside her work. Many visitors stopped to smile, and some even asked her about the meaning behind the painting. She murmured, "This is my dream house, where my mom, my brother, and a special friend are always together." Sarah felt her nose sting at the words. A few steps away, Michael stood watching Emily, his expression a blend of pride and deep affection. A local reporter approached, snapping a few photos, before turning to Michael. "Could you share the inspiration behind this exhibition?" Michael smiled. "I believe art is the most honest voice children have. They draw their hopes, their fears, and the things that make them believe. I only provide the space for that voice to be heard." While everyone enjoyed the exhibition, Michael's phone buzzed persistently. He glanced at the screen and saw his assistant's name, Nathan. Stepping into a quiet corner, Michael answered. Nathan's voice was urgent. "Michael, we have a big problem. One of our major donors just pulled their funding. It's nearly 40% of this year's budget." Michael froze. "Why?" "They've heard rumors that you've been using the foundation for personal gain. Someone's been spreading this online, and it's gaining traction fast." Michael's grip on the phone tightened. His mind jumped immediately to the whispers at school, now spilling far beyond the campus and into his professional world. Returning to the hall, he forced his expression into composure. Sarah noticed the shift in his eyes and asked quietly, "Something wrong?" "It's fine. Let's just enjoy the rest of the afternoon," he replied. though his voice was lower than usual. At that moment, Emily was invited onto the stage to receive her certificate. The spotlight lit up her beaming face, and applause filled the room. Michael pushed the figures and worries aside, willing himself to be fully present for her moment. After the awards, the family gathered around a small buffet table. Lucas passed his sister a few sweets, teasing, "The famous artist is eating so much tomorrow, the papers will say, 'Exhibition star breaks dessert record.'" Everyone laughed, but Sarah noticed Michael eating very little, his eyes often drifting to his phone. She touched his hand gently. "Tell me the truth. What's happened?" Michael sighed and decided not to hide it. "The foundation's in trouble. A major donor pulled out because of false rumors. And if we can't recover within a few months, many projects will have to stop." Sarah's eyes widened. "But that's money for children, for families in need. How could they? Because they believe what they hear instead of looking for the truth." Michael cut in his eyes, shadowed. Sarah studied him for a moment, then spoke firmly. "Then we have to make them see the truth. You've stood up for us now. Let me help you. I believe that if the community knows what you've really done, they'll stand with you." Michael's tired smile was tinged with gratitude. "Thank you. But it won't be easy. People prefer bad news over good. Then we'll tell the story in a way they can't ignore." Sarah replied with quiet determination. When the exhibition ended, they stepped out into the street. The warm glow of the street lamps reflected in Emily and Lucas's eyes as they chattered about paintings and their eagerness to create more blissfully unaware of the undercurrent about to surge beneath them. Michael gazed down at the photo of Emily beside her painting. In that moment, he realized there are things worth fighting for, not just for personal reputation, but for the trusting eyes of children who believe in you. He drew a deep breath, catching the faint sweetness of pastry still clinging to his fingers, mixed with the cool night air. Tomorrow, he thought, the fight begins. On Monday morning, the small town lay under the sudden chill of early winter. Sarah rose early as usual, preparing breakfast for Lucas and Emily before taking them to school. But Michael noticed her face was paler than normal, her eyes shadowed as if she had gone several nights without sleep. "You okay?" he asked when she sat down at the table, gently rubbing her forehead. Sarah forced a faint smile. "Probably just tired. Between the exhibition and everything going on with you, I'm fine." But when she stood to pour more milk for Emily, her body swayed unexpectedly. The cup slipped from her hand, milk spilling across the kitchen floor. Sarah's knees buckled her trembling hand, clutching the edge of the table. Michael rushed forward, catching her before she collapsed completely. Her face had gone ashen, her breath quick and shallow. He scooped her into his arms, voice urgent. "Lucas, stay here with Emily, call the neighbor for help." Driving felt like a race against time. Every turn in the road seemed too slow. Every red light an insult. The cold morning air streamed in through a crack in the window. But the shiver that passed through Michael wasn't from the weather. It was the fear rising with each passing second. Sarah leaned back in the seat, eyes half closed. "Don't worry. Just a little dizzy. Save your strength." "We're almost there," he said firmly. The car horn blared as Michael forced the SUV through traffic, heading straight for St. Mary's Hospital. Orderlies were already wheeling a gurney toward them as soon as he stopped. Michael held her hand until the emergency room doors closed in his face, leaving him stranded in the sterile white corridor. He stood rooted to the spot under the cold fluorescence. Footsteps of nurses and doctors echoed. The distant beep of heart monitors blended into a tense, unrelenting hum. Lucas called, his voice trembling. "How's Mom, Uncle Michael?" "Not sure yet." "I'll call as soon as I know," Michael answered, forcing calm into his tone, even as his grip on the phone whitened his knuckles. Almost an hour later, A young doctor emerged, pulling down her mask. "Are you family for Sarah Miller?" "Yes," Michael said quickly. "How is she?" "She's stable for now," the doctor replied. "Severe exhaustion brought on by prolonged stress and lack of sleep. If she doesn't rest, this could happen again, possibly worse." Michael exhaled slowly, relief mingled with lingering concern. "Can I see her? Just for a few minutes?" "She needs quiet and fluids." Sarah lay against the pillow, her face pale against the tangle of dark hair. Michael sat beside her, taking her hand. "I told you. Don't push yourself so hard," he said softly. Her eyes fluttered open, tired, but still resolute. "I can't stop. You're being slandered, the foundation's under attack. If I don't help, you'll fight this alone, and you know I couldn't bear that." Michael gave a short laugh, tinged with sadness. "Helping me doesn't mean sacrificing yourself. I need you not just for this fight, but in this life." Sarah said nothing, her eyes glistening. She squeezed his hand lightly, an unspoken promise in the gesture. As she closed her eyes to rest, Michael stayed by her side, watching the steady drip of the IV. His mind churned with questions. Who was behind the rumors? Why strike now, when the foundation was preparing to launch major projects? One thing was certain: if Sarah, who had dared to open her heart and care for the children alongside him, were to fall, then everything he was fighting for would lose its meaning. He took out his phone, typing a quick message to Nathan. "Find the source of the rumors. No public action until I say, and clear my schedule for the week." When a nurse came to check on Sarah, Michael stepped into the hall, inhaling the sharp scent of disinfectant. The fear that had gripped him on the drive here hardened into resolve. Before, he had been fighting for his reputation. Now he would fight for Sarah, for Lucas, for Emily, and for every child who believed in him. The hospital room door closed quietly behind him. But in his mind, another door had swung open, one leading to a full-scale counterattack to begin the moment Sarah regained her strength. On Saturday morning, the town square glowed under bright sunshine. Colorful banners lined the main street bearing the words, "Exhibition for the Future of Children," alongside the logo of Michael's charitable foundation. The malicious rumors had been exposed and disproved thanks to Nathan's work and the efforts of the volunteer team. But the real victory would come today, when the community saw the truth with their own eyes. Michael stood behind the temporary stage, looking out at the crowd. Hundreds of townspeople had gathered, including faces that had once doubted him. Lucas and Emily sat together in the front row, eyes bright with anticipation. Sarah, still not fully recovered, but determined, stood beside him in a pale blue dress, offering a steady, reassuring smile. "Ready?" she asked. Michael nodded. "This time, it's not just about clearing my name. It's about moving forward together." The event didn't open with a speech, but with a short video on the large LED screen. Images played of projects the foundation had completed: classrooms in poor neighborhoods, playgrounds for disabled children, free winter meals. Interwoven were words of thanks from parents, teachers, and children who had received scholarships. The music swelled, and the screen closed with the words, "Truth doesn't need to shout, it only needs to be seen." Applause erupted across the square. Michael walked out onto the stage. "There was a time when I thought working hard was enough." He began, his voice deep and steady. "But I learned that just one rumor, one invented story, can threaten to erase years of work. Today, I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here to thank those who stood by us, even when it would have been easier to turn away." He glanced at Sarah before continuing. "We can't build a community on suspicion. We build it on trust and on the willingness to stand together when the storm comes." In the front rows, a few people who had criticized him online lowered their heads. After the speech, the exhibition booths opened. Visitors browsed the children's artwork photos from projects and even heard students tell their own stories. Lucas showed his painting of two siblings holding hands under a sunset captioned, "Family is where you always belong." Emily came running to Michael, tugging his sleeve. "Uncle Michael, they're donating so much, I saw the charity box almost full." He bent down smiling as he patted her head, pride shining in his eyes. That afternoon, the town's mayor, who had until now remained neutral, stepped onto the stage with a microphone. "I've heard many things about Michael Miller. Today I've seen them with my own eyes, not just the projects, but the power of bringing people together. On behalf of the town, I declare that from this day forward, we will work in long-term partnership with his foundation." Cheers filled the square. Sarah's hand tightened around Michael's. Before the event closed, Michael invited all the volunteers, including the children, onto the stage. "If I could name today's victory," he said, "it wouldn't be mine alone. It belongs to all of us, this entire community." The crowd rose to their feet, clapping. Several people came forward to shake his hand and apologize for their doubts. A small boy handed him an envelope. "I don't have much, but I want to help other kids." Inside were a few crumpled bills and a note scrawled in uneven handwriting. "I believe in you." As the square slowly emptied, Michael, Sarah, Lucas, and Emily stood together, looking out over the golden light of late afternoon and the smiling faces still lingering. "We did it," Sarah whispered. Michael squeezed her hand. "No, you did it. You believed in me even at the worst moment." The four of them walked away from the square, leaving behind the sound of laughter and conversations that carried into the evening. Today's victory had not only erased the lies, but had opened a new chapter, one where trust and compassion stood stronger than any rumor. Summer arrived like a gentle promise. After the last spring rains, the sky was washed clean, stretching endlessly in a cloudless blue. Every morning brought sunlight pouring gold through the small apartment window, spilling across the wooden table over Emily's painting, The House in the Sunlight, making the yellows in it glow like a small flame. Sarah opened the window to welcome the breeze. The scent of wisteria from someone's front porch drifted in, mingling with the smell of toasted bread Emily was preparing. She paused for a moment, listening to the everyday sounds, the clinking of dishes, Lucas's giggles over the morning math riddle, and Michael's footsteps coming up the stairs. Everything felt as gentle and real as a dream you didn't want to wake from. "Good morning." Michael appeared carrying a basket of strawberries. He handed it to Emily with a playful wink. "So, what's on the menu today, Chef?" "Peanut butter toast with fresh strawberries. And orange juice for Mom." Emily replied eagerly. Her small hands moved quickly, already skilled at setting breakfast plates. Lucas sat across from her, carefully cutting the first strawberry in half. "It has to be fair," he declared, then secretly slid the bigger piece toward his sister. Michael sat down watching the two children. In the summer light, their faces looked peaceful, no longer holding the guarded expressions of the past months. Leaning towards Sarah, he lowered his voice as if not to disturb the warmth of the moment. "I've signed the official cooperation agreement with the town. The fund will launch 2 new programs, a summer lunch project and a children's reading club." Sarah set her orange juice down, a smile lighting her eyes. "You've been doing so much." "Not just me." Michael looked toward the kids. "We're doing it together." That afternoon, all 4 of them went to the lakeside park. Summer seemed to sprinkle sugar over the water. Sunlight glittered on every ripple, the children's feet pounded across the grass, their laughter echoing into the green canopy above. On a small wooden stage at the far end of the lawn, a group of teenagers rehearsed for Sunday's festival. Emily settled on a bench, sketching quickly. A few pencil strokes brought out a row of trees. A scatter of fine dots became a flock of birds. Lucas lay on his stomach, chin in hands, occasionally offering commentary. "That cloud looks like a boat." Sarah leaned back, breathing deeply as sunlight shimmered across the lake. The days in the hospital felt like a faraway dream. She had learned to set down the burden of carrying everything alone. Ever since she dared to let someone else hold her hand, life had grown lighter. She turned to Michael. "I want to take one day off a week to attend an office design course. Rachel says if I get certified, I'll have more hours and better insurance." "I'm all for it," Michael said without hesitation. "I'll take the kids on those days. And—" He paused for a second, a rare shy smile flickering. "I think it's time we talked about sharing our lives, not just our work schedules." Sarah understood. Her eyes answered without words. "Then tonight we'll celebrate with pasta cooked by you." Michael feigned alarm, warning I only excel at tomato sauce and ordering takeout. They both laughed. The sound rang through the air like glass, clear and bright. In the days that followed, their routines found a steady rhythm. Mornings, Sarah went to work. Afternoons, she attended her class. Emily joined the summer art club at the community center, while Lucas joined the kids' team reading aloud to younger children. Every night before bed, Emily placed a star sticker on the wall calendar, her shining day. If she had spoken up, finished a sketch, or simply dared to say, "I'm not afraid anymore," a star appeared. One evening, Emily placed a new drawing on the kitchen table. I drew "The House That Breathes." In it, a small house stood with windows flung open, streams of warm color flowing through, carrying the sound of laughter in the living room, spoons clinking in the kitchen footsteps on the porch. "Our old house," breathed with difficulty, she said earnestly. But now the house breathes deep. Sarah wrapped her in an embrace. Michael stood beside them, his hand resting on their backs, a silent gesture that warmed all the way to the heart. The town library became their new meeting place. Every Wednesday, Michael took Emily and Lucas to summer story hour. The low-ceilinged reading room hummed with slow-turning fans, carrying the scent of old paper mixed with fresh ink and the rustle of turning pages. Lucas read comic books aloud to a group of preschoolers. His voice was clear and steady, pausing to explain tricky words with improvised acting. Emily sat by the window sketching as she listened, eyes sparkling at the story's climax. At the end of one session, the elderly librarian handed Lucas a young storyteller card. He slipped it into his shirt pocket like a treasure, whispering to Michael, "I used to be afraid of standing in front of the class. Now, I wait for my turn." Michael remembered the boy in the cafeteria months ago, head bowed over a slice of bread, and realized some changes run deep like underground water. One sweltering afternoon, a sudden summer rain poured down. The family found themselves stuck under the awning of an old bookstore. The white-haired shop owner beckoned them inside and brewed tea. As rain drummed on the tin roof, Michael noticed a slim book on the shelf, How to Plant Summers. Smiling, he read the title aloud. "We're already doing that," Sarah said, turning toward him. The old man slid a fabric-covered notebook toward Emily. "For the young artist. Record your summer." Emily clutched it to her chest, nodding solemnly, as if entrusted with a great task. When the rain stopped, the street shone like glass. Lucas leapt over puddles. Emily raised her notebook to the sky. "I'll start with a painting of the rain," she declared. Sarah linked arms with Michael, walking slowly. Summer had just tapped their shoulders, gentle yet sure. That evening, on their small balcony, the four of them watched the pale lavender sunset drift over the rooftops. In the distance, the city lights began to glow like modern fireflies. Michael placed a small box on the table. "I have something for all of us." Emily opened it first, letting out a small gasp. Inside was a tiny silver keychain engraved with an open door. It's the open door." "I had 4 made," Michael said, handing one to each of them. to remind us that our home, whether it's an apartment, a painting, or a rainy afternoon, is always open toward the light. Sarah turned the keychain in her hand. "I thought you'd give me an actual house key," she teased, half joking. Michael paused. "If you want." He looked straight into her eyes, not turning away. "I'm not in a rush, but I know what I hope for to keep going together." The evening breeze carried the scent of wet leaves. Sarah didn't answer in words. She simply leaned against his shoulder. Emily and Lucas understood in their own way. They huddled closer, the 4 keychains chiming softly like wind bells. Night fell completely. From the living room, Emily's house in the sunlight cast a faint golden glow under the lamp. She opened her new notebook and wrote the first line. The summer of hope began with a breakfast of strawberries, a sudden rain, and 4 open doors. Lucas added, and a new storyteller. Sarah wrote, and a mother learning to breathe deeply. Michael closed the notebook, smiling. And a man learning how to stay. Outside, the summer night was still. Inside, 4 breaths moved under one roof. There was no applause, no stage lights, only the warmth of the present, enough to nourish the days ahead. Summer opened, as every door opens toward the light. And at that threshold they stepped forward hand in hand. Golden twilight stretched along the small street where the vibrant late summer leaves swayed gently in the breeze. Emily stood by her bedroom window, her gaze drifting toward the park at the end of the road. From here she could see Oliver's figure playing basketball with a few new friends. Laughter rang out clear and bright like the melody of joy rediscovered. Downstairs in the living room, Sarah and Daniel were setting the dinner table. The old wooden table now wore a new soft green cloth with a vase of sunflowers in the center. A gift from a parent at Sarah's school after the success of the charity fundraiser. That warm atmosphere with the quiet rhythm of knife against cutting board and the aroma of the stew made the small house feel as though it held an entire world of peace. Yet behind that calm, there were still things left unsaid. Daniel climbed the stairs and tapped lightly on Emily's door. "Would you like to help me set the table?" he asked, his voice as gentle as an invitation. Emily turned and smiled. "Yes, I'll be right down." But her eyes still held a trace of unspoken thought. Since the day Daniel revealed the truth that he was her uncle, the distance between them had closed, but at the same time new questions had surfaced. Emily wasn't angry, but she often wondered why had it taken so many years for them to find each other. And if it hadn't been for that lunch hour in the cafeteria, would any of this have ever happened? When she came down to the kitchen, Sarah was busy arranging the salad. Daniel glanced at the two of them, his smile faint, but with a hint of weariness in his eyes. Work at the company was still relentless, and although the foundation had recovered partially, it was not yet back to its pre-crisis strength. That evening's dinner unfolded with laughter, interspersed with warm pauses. Oliver excitedly shared how he had scored points in the school basketball game, while Emily spoke about a new art project for which she had been chosen as team leader. Sarah listened, nodding her eyes full of pride. Daniel at times simply sat in silence watching them. There were moments when he almost forgot that he had once lived an entirely different life, cold, closed off, and filled only with numbers and contracts. Now he was beginning to realize what makes life whole is not multi-million-dollar deals, but the feeling of sitting together, knowing you belong here. After dinner, the whole family went to the park. The sunset had nearly faded, but the newly lit street lamps cast a soft, dreamlike glow. Emily brought her sketchbook while Oliver continued to play ball. Sarah and Daniel sat on a stone bench watching the two children play. "I think someday we might have to leave this city," Daniel said quietly, his eyes still following Emily. "There are other opportunities, places that could give the kids more." Sarah was silent for a moment, then smiled faintly. "As long as we're together anywhere is fine." "But Are you sure you're ready for a new beginning? Daniel didn't answer right away. He thought back to everything they had been through: Emily's hungry afternoons, Sarah's illness, the gossip at school, the financial crisis, and the moments when it felt like they might break. Yet it was precisely those trials that had made them stronger and bound them closer. Emily, meanwhile, was sketching a picture of that very sunset, 4 family members standing side by side. But in one corner of the drawing, she added a road leading toward the horizon, hazy and far away. That road wasn't necessarily for leaving. It was a reminder that there are always new journeys, unexplored mysteries. She looked over at Daniel, Sarah, and Oliver and smiled softly. Perhaps life never becomes completely stable, but with family by your side, every surprise can become an opportunity. Night fell, and the family returned home. Sarah tucked Oliver into bed while Daniel made Emily a cup of hot cocoa. They sat at the kitchen table, the only sound the ticking of the clock. "Uncle Daniel?" Emily began, hesitating slightly. "If one day I want to know more about your parents, about our family's past, will you tell me?" Daniel looked at her, his eyes deepening. "Of course, but some stories need time to hear and to understand. When you're ready, I'll tell you." Emily nodded, holding the warm cup in her hands. She didn't know how many secrets that answer contained, but she felt at peace. Outside, the city was drifting into sleep. But inside the small house, another kind of light still burned quietly, the light of hope, of kinship, of unopened doors. And somewhere along the long road ahead, new stories were already waiting for them.